Some of the sailors cheered at this, but some said that that was all very well. "This isn't going to be much fun," whispered Edmund to Caspian. "What are we to do if half these fellows hang back?" "Wait," Caspian whispered back. "I've still a card to play." "Aren't you going to say anything, Reep?" whispered Lucy. "No, why should your majesty expect it?" answered Reepy Cheep, in a voice that most people heard. "My own plans are made. While I can, I sail east in the Dwn Trdr. When she fails me, I paddle east in my coracle. When she sinks, I shall swim east with my 4 paws. And when I can swim no longer, if I have not reached Aslan's country, or shot over the edge of the world in some vast cataract, I shall sink with my nose to the sunrise, and Peepy Chick will be heard of the talking mice in Narnia." "Hear, hear," said a sailor. "I'd say the same, barring the bit about the coracle, which wouldn't bear me," he added in a lower voice. "I'm not going to be outdone by a mouse." At this point Caspian jumped to his feet. "Friends," he said, "I think you have not quite understood our purpose. You talk as if we had come to you with our hat in our hand, begging for shipmates. It isn't like that at all. We sail, and our royal brother and sister and their kinsmen, and Sir Reepycheep, the good knight, and the Lord Drinian have an errand to the world's edge. It is our pleasure to choose from such as you are willing to those whom we deem worthy of so high an enterprise. We have not said that any can come for the asking. That is why we shall now command the Lord Drinian and Master Rince to consider carefully what men amongst you are the hardest in battle, the most skilled seamen, the purest in blood, the most loyal to our person, and the cleanest of life and manners, and to give their names to us in a schedule." He paused and went on in a quicker voice. "Aslan's Mane!" he exclaimed. "Do you think that the privilege of seeing the last things is to be bought for a song? Why, every man that comes with us shall bequeath the title of Dwn Trdr to all his descendants, and when we have landed at Car Pavel on the homeward voyage, he shall either have gold or land enough to make him rich all his life. Now, scatter over the island, all of you. In half an hour's time I shall receive the names that Lord Drinian brings me." There was a rather sheepish silence, and then the crew made their bows and moved away, one in this direction and one in that, but mostly in little knots or bunches, talking. "And now for the Lord Roop," said Caspian. But turning to the head of the table, he saw that Roop was already there. He had arrived silent and unnoticed while the discussion was going on, and was seated beside the Lord Asgod. The daughter of Ramadou stood beside him, as if she had just helped him into his chair. Ramadou stood behind him and laid both his hands on Roop's gray head. Even in the daylight, a faint silver light came from the hands of the star. There was a smile on Roop's haggard face. He held out one of his hands to Lucy and the other to Caspian. For a moment it looked as if he were going to say something. Then his smile brightened, as if he were feeling some delicious sensation. A long sigh of contentment came from his lips. His head fell forward, and he slept. "Poor Roop," said Lucy. "I am glad. He must have had terrible times." Let's don't even think of it," said Eustace. Meanwhile, Caspian's speech, helped by some magic of the island, was having just the effect he intended. A good many of those who had been anxious enough to get out of the voyage felt quite differently about being left out of it, and of course whenever any one sailor announced that he had made up his mind to ask for permission to sail, the ones who hadn't said this felt that they were getting fewer and more uncomfortable, so that before the half an hour was nearly over, several people were positively sucking up to Drinian and Rince, at least that was what they called it in my school, to get a good report. And soon there were only 3 left who didn't want to go, and those 3 were trying very hard to persuade the others to stay with them. And very shortly after that, there was only 1 left, and in the end he began to be afraid of being left behind all on his own, and changed his mind. At the end of the half hour, they all came trooping back to the Aslan's table, and stood at one end while Drinian and Rince went down and sat with Caspian and made their report. And Caspian accepted all the men, but that one who had changed his mind at the last moment. His name was Pittacream, and he stayed on the island of the star all the time the others were away looking for the world's end, and he very much wished he had gone with them. He wasn't the sort of man who could enjoy talking to Ramadou and Ramadou's daughter, nor they to him, and it rained a good deal, and though there was a wonderful feast on the table every night, he didn't much enjoy it. He said it gave him the creeps sitting there alone, and in the rain as most likely not, with those four lords asleep at the other end of the table. When the others returned, he fell so out of things that he deserted on the voyage home at the Lone Islands, and went and lived in the Calormen, where he told wonderful stories about his adventures at the end of the world, until at last he came to believe them himself. So you may say, in a sense, that he lived happily ever after, but he could never bear mice. That night they all ate and drank together at the great table between the pillars, where the feast was magically renewed. The next morning the Dwn Trdr set sail once more, just when the great birds had come and gone again. "Lady," said Caspian, "I hope to speak with you again when I have broken the enchantments." And Ramadou's daughter looked at him and smiled.